I was coming back from our General Assembly at the Phoenix on Wednesday, and I went back to Exeter Central train station to get my train back home. And I went onto the platform, and in the waiting room there was a man lying on the floor. The waiting room had been emptied, which is very unusual because it was really cold, and I think it was because this man was in there. And I don't think anyone asked him if he was okay, so I went in and asked him if he needed help and if he was okay, and it turned out that he had been sleeping on the streets, and that 3 nights previously he had got assaulted by a group of drunk youths which had left him with scratches all over his face and a big black eye. And I asked him if he'd been to St Petrock's, and he said that he had, but then he was waiting for a place at Gabriel House, but there wasn't one at the moment. And it made me think, if I'd been coming back to Occupy from an Occupy GA that had been on the green, then I would have been able to tell him to go there, to know that they would provide a safe place for him to sleep. They'd provide him with something warm to eat and some clothes or sleeping bags to sleep in, so that he wouldn't be out on the streets that night. The SHOT team, which is the street outreach team, say that they're very aware of all the rough sleepers and that they've offered them accommodation, but for whatever reason he hadn't been, because he said that he was waiting to get into Gabriel House. Perhaps he didn't know about the emergency accommodation that has been set up due to the cold weather, or perhaps he'd been turned down for it, or perhaps they hadn't been able to see him for a few days to tell him about it. But for whatever reason he slipped through the net, and there was one there to catch him. I know that in Occupy, particularly towards the end, the interaction we had with some of the people who were living there was very much focused on their antisocial behaviour and on the negative aspects of having some homeless people living there. But I think that overshadowing also means that people lost sight of the fact that if we'd have been there, we'd have helped him. And because St Petrock's was closed, because there didn't seem to be anyone else, I don't know what happened to him, but he probably spent the night sleeping on the streets with lots of injuries and possibly alcohol abuse, and it being really, really cold. He's probably alright, but I worried about him, and I worried about what would happen to him. And for me, Occupy was taking responsibility for whoever walked into your path. And I felt sad that that safety net has gone, and that it means that people sometimes will fall through the net. People that we could have caught and helped. I'm not saying Occupy is perfect. As it was a nightmare in some ways. But I think also it shows the limits that St Petrock's and the Street Homeless Outreach team have, and the ways in which Occupy actually filled the gaps that perhaps they couldn't. So I wanted to remember all the good things that Occupy could offer, and I felt a sense of sadness that we wouldn't be able to offer that anymore because we've moved off the green. I hope he's okay. and I hope you found somewhere to sleep. But equally, you might not have. And if it's really cold and you're ill or you're drunk, then it's fairly easy to die of hypothermia in this cold weather. I'd like a society to exist where people don't fall through the cracks. And I think St Petrock's and the Street Homeless Outreach team do a really good job on the whole. But I think also Occupy brought something too, which was out of hours, that meant that in those circumstances we could have offered something. And I think that's worth remembering too. It's not that we were better than Petrock's, or Petrock's was better than us. It's just that we could offer things that they couldn't, as they could offer things that we couldn't. I hope that something can change, which would mean that all the good points of Occupy and all the good points of the shop team and St Petrock's and what the cathedral do could be brought together to make sure people don't fall through the gaps, and that I don't have to worry about someone dying on the streets of Exeter. That's all I wanted to say, really.